February 9th, 1964, on The Ed Sullivan Show, they were an instant phenomenon. What was it that made the group the best-selling popular musical act of the 20th century? Was it the natural ability of the Fab Four, the chemistry of Lennon and McCartney, their clothes, their hairstyles? In his book, Outliers, Malcolm Gladwell, author of bestsellers The Tipping Point and Blink, attributes the success of the Beatles to 10,000 hours. Gladwell's assertion is that, though timing, luck, and talent have a lot to do with it, the real differentiator between a contender and a champion is practice. To understand how practice makes perfect applies, considering the rest of the Beatles' story. In 1960, prior to their U.S. debut, the Beatles were invited by an enterprising Hamburg club owner to perform in his strip clubs. Because they were not typical rock and roll venues, bands were required to play non-stop for hours upon hours. This experience allowed, it actually forced, the Beatles to get much more practice than virtually any other band at the time. Just during their 3 stints in Hamburg, the Beatles logged some 1,000 hours on stage, and by the time they entered the U.S. scene in 1964, they had performed an estimated 1,200 times. According to Philip Norman, author of the Beatles biography Shout, they were no good on stage when they went there to Hamburg, and they were very good when they came back. It was golf great Gary Player who is credited with saying, "The harder I work, the luckier I get." And there are plenty of sports examples to support Gladwell's 10,000 hours premise. One such case is Tiger Woods, probably the greatest putter of all time and known for his intense practice regimen. Tiger works to perfect his short putting by placing 2 tees in the ground just slightly further apart than the width of his putter's blade. Then, using only his right hand to drill, he ensures that he draws the putter blade back square. His standard is to keep on practicing until he makes 100 putts in a row. Is it possible that any person can become a prodigy with practice? Studies would indicate that the answer is maybe. In their 1990 study, German psychologist K. Anders Ericsson and 2 associates studied violinists at Berlin's Academy of Music. The students were separated into groups based on how much they had practiced while growing up. Of the 3 groups, the group that by the age of 20 had totaled 10,000 hours of practice was considered the elite performers. Those with 8,000 hours were considered good, and those with 4,000 hours were unlikely to ever play professionally. According to Gladwell, the striking thing about Ericsson's study is that he and his colleagues couldn't find any naturals, musicians who floated effortlessly to the top while practicing a fraction of the time their peers did. According to neurologist Daniel Levitin, the 10,000-hour rule doesn't just apply to sports stars and musicians. The same holds true for composers, fiction writers, chess players, and even master criminals. It seems that while practice is the key, there has to be some innate ability present as well. For example, if you have no athleticism whatsoever, you may not be able to become a professional athlete no matter how much you practice. If you can't carry a tune, you may never be a Pavarotti. On the other hand, if you think you have a natural gift that will carry you to greatness without any hard work, you may be sorely disappointed. In Outliers, evidence is presented showing that practice leads to prowess. Well, I will admit to sometimes growing impatient with practice. As I see it, like Gary Player, the harder I work, the luckier I get. I'm John Longstreet with another edition of the Longstreet Beat. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll see you again next time.